The certified letter arrived at the Oakmont Ridge Homeowners Association office on a Tuesday morning in October. Inside was a single page, professionally printed, with my signature at the bottom. It informed the board that their golf course, the jewel of their premium subdivision, the amenity listed in every property disclosure, the feature that justified their inflated dues, was now private property. My private property. And that unless they wanted to discuss a lease agreement at commercial rates, they had exactly 30 days to remove every card, every ball washer, every bench, and every sign. I know this because Sandra Voigt, the HOA president, called me 17 minutes after signing for it. The voicemail she left was 3 minutes of threats delivered in a voice that kept cracking at the edges. I saved it. I've saved everything. But to understand how I came to own the Oakmont Ridge Golf Course for $127,000 at a county foreclosure auction, and why Sandra Voigt's hands were shaking when she read that letter, you need to go back 18 months. Back to the afternoon I sat in their clubhouse and was told, very politely, that I was not Oakmont Ridge material. My name is David Carver. I'm a commercial property investor. I flip industrial sites, apartment complexes, strip malls, anything with clean title and workable numbers. I don't play golf. I've never owned a golf cart. But I know how to read a tax lien list, and I know what happens when institutions get comfortable. The Oakmont Ridge Golf Course went to auction because nobody paid the property taxes for 22 consecutive months. Not missed payments, total radio silence. The county sent notices to the address on file. Those notices went to a management company that had dissolved in 2019. No response. No contact. By the time the lien hit the foreclosure list in August, the arrearage was $74,000, and the auction minimum was set just above that figure to cover costs. I found it on a Thursday. I drove out that Saturday. Oakmont Ridge is one of those master plan communities that looks like a resort brochure. Manicured lawns, brick columns at the entrance, neighborhood covenants thicker than most mortgages. The golf course sits at the heart of it. 18 holes, full irrigation, a clubhouse with a stone fireplace and leather furniture that smells like money. I parked near the pro shop and walked the property. The greens were perfect. Sprinklers running on schedule. A foursome was teeing off on the 7th hole. Everything operational, everything humming. I checked the county assessor's records on my phone. The course was listed under Oakmont Ridge Golf LLC, a holding company established in 2003 when the development was built. I pulled the LLC's state filings. Dissolved in 2018 for failure to file annual reports. No registered agent. No active management. The course had been running on autofall for years. Maintenance contracts renewing automatically, dues payments covering operations, nobody watching the actual ownership structure because nobody thought they needed to. I sat in my truck and did the math. The HOA had roughly 800 homes. Average dues ran $4,200 annually. The covenants, which I'd pulled from the county recorder, explicitly stated that all residents had perpetual access to the golf course as a primary amenity. The HOA marketed the course in every listing. It was the reason people paid a premium to live there, and nobody owned it. Not legally. Not anymore. I went back to my office and started the research that would take 3 weeks to complete. I confirmed the dissolution of Oakmont Ridge Golf LLC. I traced every filing, every deed, every lien. I confirmed that the county's foreclosure was legitimate and that the title, once sold, would transfer clean. I hired an attorney named Martin Reese who specialized in distressed asset acquisitions and asked him one question. If I buy this at auction, will it hold up? He read everything I gave him. Then he looked at me over his reading glasses and said, the HOA should have been paying attention. The auction was held on a Wednesday morning in the county admin building. I wore a suit. I brought a cashier's check for $150,000, which was more than I needed but less than I was willing to spend. There were 4 other bidders. 2 dropped out in the first round. The third was a golf course management firm that stopped at $110,000. The fourth was a developer who went to $125,000 and paused. I bid $127,000. The auctioneer counted down. The gavel fell. I owned the Oakmont Ridge Golf Course. I didn't announce it. I recorded the deed quietly, updated the county tax rules, and paid the arrearage in full. Then I did nothing for 60 days except watch. The HOA didn't notice. The residents didn't notice. The golf course kept running because the maintenance contracts were still active and the operational accounts still had funds. Life in Oakmont Ridge continued exactly as it always had, with one small difference. The land under their feet no longer belonged to them. I sent the trespass notice on a Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, Sandra Voigt was in my voicemail threatening legal action. By Wednesday, the HOA had hired an attorney. By Thursday, that attorney had read the deed and gone very, very quiet. And by Friday, I was standing in my new clubhouse, watching Sandra Voigt walk across the parking lot toward me, and I knew exactly what I was going to say. She arrived with 2 board members and a man in a gray suit who introduced himself as Kenneth Darrow, legal counsel for the Oakmont Ridge Homeowners Association. I met them in the clubhouse dining room. I'd arranged 4 chairs on one side of a table and 1 on the other. I took the single chair. Sandra didn't sit. She placed both hands flat on the table and said, "This is extortion." I slid a folder across to Darrow. "That's the recorded deed, the county foreclosure documentation, and the title insurance policy. Everything's in order." Darrow opened the folder. His eyes moved across the first page, stopped, moved to the second. He set it down carefully. "Mr. Carver, the HOA has operated this course as a community amenity for 20 years. The covenants explicitly guarantee access. The covenants guarantee access to a course owned by Oakmont Ridge Golf LLC," I said. "That entity dissolved in 2018. The county foreclosed on the property in September for unpaid taxes. I purchased it legally. Your covenants don't bind my property." One of the board members, a man with silver hair and a tennis tan, leaned forward. "You can't just buy a golf course out from under an entire neighborhood." "I didn't buy it out from under anyone. I bought it at a public auction your organization failed to attend." Sandra's voice went tight. "We were never notified. The county sent notices to the address on file. If that address was outdated, that's an administrative failure on your end, not a defect in the sale." Darrow cleared his throat. "Mr. Carver, what exactly are you proposing?" I pulled a second folder from my briefcase. "A lease agreement. 20-year term. Annual payment of $320,000, adjusted for inflation. The HOA retains operational control. I retain ownership." Sandra's face went red. "That's $400 per household. That's the commercial rate for exclusive access to an 18-hole championship course with full amenities. Our dues are already over $4,000 a year. Then you'll need to raise them. Or you can decline the lease, and I'll open the course to the public at standard greens fees." The silver-haired board member stood up. "You're holding this community hostage." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm offering you the same arrangement you thought you already had, at a price that reflects the asset's actual value. If that feels like hostage-taking, maybe you should ask yourself why nobody on this board noticed you didn't own the course anymore." Darrow held up a hand. "Let's take a breath. Mr. Carver, you're within your legal rights. But surely you understand the optics here. You'd be forcing 800 families to pay for something they believed was already theirs. They believed wrong. And that's not my fault." Sandra sat down. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, sharper. "What do you really want?" "Exactly what I said. A lease or a sale. I'll sell the course back to the HOA for $1.2 million. That's under market value for a property this size. Or you sign the lease and spread the cost over 20 years. We don't have $1.2 million. Then you take the lease to your membership, explain how this happened, and put it to a vote." She looked at Darrow. He looked at the folder. The room was very quiet. I stood. "You have until November 15th to decide. If I don't hear from you by then, I'm opening the course to public play on January 1st. I'll set the rate at $60 per round. I'll run weekend tournaments. I'll sell memberships to non-residents at $1,200 annually. And every time one of your neighbors looks out their window and sees a stranger teeing off on what used to be their private course, they'll know exactly who let it happen." Darrow closed the folder. "We'll need time to consult with the board. You have 33 days. They left without another word. I stood at the clubhouse window and watched them cross the parking lot. Sandra was talking rapidly, hands moving. The silver-haired man looked like he wanted to hit something. Darrow walked with his head down, already thinking through the fight he knew he couldn't win. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the way I always feel at this stage of an acquisition, like a man who's just shown someone the blueprint of a building they've been living in for years and never bothered to inspect. The HOA called an emergency meeting 4 days later. I know because Martin Reese received a letter demanding I attend to explain my actions to the community. I declined. This wasn't a negotiation that required my presence. The numbers were the numbers. What I didn't expect was the phone call I got the following Tuesday from a woman named Beth Kendrick. She lived on Fairway Lane, backed right up to the 7th hole. Her voice was calm, measured. "Mr. Carver, I'm not calling to yell at you. I'm calling because I need to understand something. Did the HOA really not own the course?" "No, ma'am. The LLC that owned it dissolved in 2018. The taxes went unpaid. The county foreclosed. And nobody noticed. Not until I bought it." She was quiet for a moment. "How much are you asking?" I told her. She didn't react with outrage. She said, "That's going to hurt people." "I know. But you're doing it anyway. I'm offering a fair lease on an asset I own. What the HOA does with that offer is up to them." She hung up without saying goodbye. The vote took place on November 10th in the Oakmont Ridge Community Center. I wasn't there, but Martin attended as an observer. He called me at 9:30 that evening. It passed. Barely. 407 in favor, 391 against. They're signing the lease. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What was the temperature in the room? Cold. Sandra Voigt resigned halfway through. 2 other board members followed. There's a recall petition circulating for the rest. Did anyone ask about a purchase instead? They floated a bond measure. It died in committee. Nobody wants to explain to their neighbors why they need to borrow $1.2 million to buy something they thought they already owned. I thanked Martin and ended the call. I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the deed framed on the wall behind my desk. I thought about Sandra Voigt's voice on that first voicemail, the anger, the disbelief. I thought about Beth Kendrick asking if I was really going to do this. I thought about 800 families writing bigger checks next year because the people they trusted to manage their community had simply stopped paying attention. The lease was signed on November 14th. The HOA retained full operational control. I received the first annual payment in December. The course remained private, exactly as it had always been. But the story didn't end there. 3 months later, I got a call from Greg Haverman, one of the new board members elected after the recall. He asked if I'd be willing to meet. I agreed. We sat in the same clubhouse dining room. This time, he sat across from me with a folder of his own. "Mr. Carver, we spent the last 90 days auditing every contract, every covenant, every asset the HOA claims to manage. We found 2 more properties with ownership issues. Not as severe as the golf course, but close. We also found $340,000 in unaccounted expenditures and a reserve fund that should have $1.8 million, but only has $600,000. I didn't say anything. He slid the folder across. "We're cleaning house. New management company, full financial review, updated asset registry. And I wanted to say something to you directly. Go ahead. You didn't do anything wrong. You bought a property legally. You offered us a fair deal. And the only reason you were able to do it is because we failed. Not you. Us." He paused. "So thank you." I looked at him for a long moment. For what? For the wake-up call. This community was running on autopilot, and nobody wanted to ask hard questions. You forced us to ask them. That's worth something. I shook his hand. 6 months after that, the HOA approached me with a buyback offer, $980,000, financed through a special assessment and a 10-year bond. I accepted. The course returned to community ownership in July, under a new LLC with proper management and a board that actually read the filings. I walked the property one last time before the sale closed. The greens were still perfect. The sprinklers still ran on schedule. A foursome was teeing off on the 7th hole. Everything looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. I drove out through the brick columns at the entrance and thought about institutions that get comfortable. About people who assume someone else is watching the details. About the difference between what you think you own and what you actually control. The check cleared on a Friday. I framed it next to the deed. A reminder that the most expensive mistakes are the ones you never see coming, and that the best defense against losing something isn't anger or threats or lawyers. It's paying attention. I still don't play golf, but I know what an 18-hole course is worth, and I know that Oakmont Ridge will never forget it either.